a new face on the roundtable.
Yeah. Hello. Yeah, finally I made it. Just came back from Sweden yesterday.
Nice. Yeah, let's wait another minute. Maybe someone else shows up. A few people excuse themselves today with family stuff and other stuff.
So the ones that
Michael
accuse
is,
themselves are not getting penalty points. That's fine with me.
yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Also, I want to start screenshot the attendance list. So, in case we are giving some credits for those guilds that are actually joining and interested in stuff on Wax.
Yeah, today you can do it.
Yeah. I hope my light is okay. The light is not so good here.
Seems the connection is pretty bad. You're very pixelated for me.
Yeah, the camera is not good. It's
okay.
2020 MacBook, I think. And
no, that sucks.
No, it looks like a connection issue because sometimes you're
really
sharp and sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty odd.
So I'm sharing my browser now. But it's weird that it should be a connection because look at this.
Yeah, browser is also pixelated at times. That's very strange.
I think just my device is getting on its knees with all the tabs open.
That's a lot of tabs.
Yeah, that's basically everything we're going to look at. But okay, let's get started with our roundtable number 6. And today is September 26th, and we're meeting again today in a slightly smaller circle. And the agenda is like you're used to. We are talking about updates, network health, and we composed actually the API usage stats that were submitted through the report. Then we are diving into the guideline changes we are working on, and we'll ask you for your feedback and your opinion. And afterwards, we're going to have an open forum, like always. So starting with the updates, since we met last time, we published the guild reports for September 2023. We have 36 guilds rated, 21 active guilds, 12 standby guilds passing the minimum requirements, a few not making the minimum requirements, and one guild unfortunately and sadly retired. And we have a new guild at the very top, Hive. Ben, congratulations for that. And this month, the guild the score threshold for standby has moved slightly slower to 193.5 for the last top 21 guild and 187 for the top standby guild. Closing with Wax Madrid at 126, slightly above our threshold of 125. And we have a timeline for the 5.3 evaluation. So we are going to have another roundtable until then, but the guild submission cutoff for your next report is due on Sunday, October 15th, end of the day. And the reports then will be published on October 31st. Looking at the current network health, we can see that our network is performing widely healthy. We are not having many issues with rounds and blocks missed. It's getting harder to meet the requirement for full points on round availability right now. With 2 missed rounds, you're sitting right above 99.9%. So full points for round availability. And a third missed round would cost you a point in this category. But as we see, not many rounds were missed during the last 30 days. CPU Our block producer benchmarks are also looking pretty good. Anyone is within a range of 0.15 to 0.3. Not many very apparent issues here. Looking good so far. Just make sure to monitor your situation closely to meet the requirement for the block producer benchmark. We can also have a look at the current situation with transactions in the network for the past 14 days. We are going to always look at the past 14 days for this one. So this is now minus 14 days. Usually I'm looking at the host 29, which seems to be feeding a good amount of data. Let's scroll down here. We are seeing on the BP metrics panel here, we are seeing a small incident with double producing on one guild on the 18th of September, so almost a week ago. And then we are also seeing that the low transaction rate has been corrected or has improved over the past week. So transactions are flowing very well at the moment. Not many blocks are missed. Block time seems about right. This is due to peering, latency in peering. And also we are getting rid of the empty blocks per round, it seems. So the situation is improving again. I guess the spammer has stopped spamming us for now. In case you didn't know, this tool is open for everyone. For anyone, you can just log in with your GitHub or your other single sign-on options like Google and have a look at it yourself. Okay. On the last report, we asked you for your API usage stats, which we went through then in the report and composed a list of it. I'm sharing the link so you can have a look yourself. And as we see, we have a wide range of API call counts across the several APIs we are hosting as a public infrastructure. We have some huge numbers and some slightly lower numbers with guilds that just recently started providing Hyperions, for example. So this range is somewhere between a few thousand for 7 days. So the stats are for 7 days, up to a few million requests on several guilds, which are probably also the guilds that are on wax for a very long time. And then the RPC used by my community, by the users, also range from, let's say, 1 million in 7 days up to 180 million or 126 million on another occasion. And at the bottom, we can see a total, just a sum, an average, which is not very accurate considering that we have a wide range, and the median of, let's say, about 20 million RPC calls on guilds. And for the Hyperion, 762,000 calls on a weekly base. So going forward, we are going to compose this list. So
It might also be helpful to compare when you talk about Hyperion, what type of Hyperion they are. Like, we don't expose a full Hyperion, so the whole 20 terabytes. So therefore, I mean, I see the request calls and it just says we don't have it. So that's probably why some get a lot more than others, whether they're just serving recent data or whether they're serving full data. So just a piece of metrics to think about on that.
Nice. Okay, that's a good point. So going forward, I will also add another column. We will also add another column with the type of Hyperion, partial, namely partial or full. And then we also see some stats for the light API, which seems to be a widely used API in our public infrastructure. IPFS with some stats, basic. Probably on NFT or market heavy projects, so displaying NFTs. And then Atomic API also being very well used across the board. So the link is shared. You can revisit after the call. Then we also want to talk about a recent incident we had 2 days ago, where some of the Wax Amsterdam found out that the indexer stopped, and we were
all of us did. Everybody's alarms started going off. They all broke.
So basically any Hyperion in the network broke at that moment because there was a, let's call it, poison transaction. We can have a look at the transaction here. The transaction is like a curiosity at the moment. It takes forever to load.
Poisoned is a relative term. I mean, I think it was an extreme use case that wasn't handled properly, you know, at the code level. I mean, it wasn't intentional, I wouldn't think, but it definitely broke some things.
Yeah. So the reason was, as I understood, that the RabbitMQ, which is the messenger between the Wax node and Hyperion, couldn't handle the header length of the transaction of the message buffer, and that's where the indexer stopped because it couldn't process this particular transaction. And as we see, it's a lot of Farmers World action. It's all the same, recovering.
Oh, the amount of damage and just time wasted for what that probably generated.
Oh, it saved him like 30 milliseconds of transaction. That's what, 8 cents right now?
It probably cost me 30 hours of work. Because then all of my Hyperions got behind, and it's not easy to resync them. I killed a ship node, I killed a rabbit node, and one of my Hyperions still isn't right. So, yes, to save 30 milliseconds.
Yeah, not only yours. There's a ton of Hyperions that are not back up yet.
Oh,
if we check on
that's
the
a whole
dashboard.
different issue. Yes, that's a whole different issue. But again, like I say, he didn't do anything particularly malicious. He just did something that the system let him do for probably a reason.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to do it this way because of how we currently handle the blockchain, the transaction time. So
Correct.
It was not his fault.
That's why I say poison's kind of a relative term. I mean, I guess, you know, you can accidentally drink antifreeze, but anyway.
So,
but yes, it was interesting. I mean, we're far better now. I wouldn't call it an exploit, but the bug has been fixed, so it shouldn't happen again. And it was just an interesting edge case.
Yeah, I would say this is a great case for community cooperation because such cases is impossible to predict. And thankfully, our blockchain didn't stop. It was only a part of blockchain functionality, which is provided publicly. And this is pretty cool.
And shout out to Igor for banging out that fix, because he was definitely aware of it, trying to fix it, and then a couple hours banged out that official fix. So.
Yeah, it only took a few hours. So in case you missed it, there's a new release on the Hyperion API. Make sure to update your Hyperion API.
Yeah, for everyone's information, you can perfectly and safely upgrade from 3.3.5 to the latest version and roll back if you want, and everything works, I tested it. So feel free to upgrade as soon as possible.
Okay, wonderful. So every roundtable is something new. And then on the agenda, we have a few guideline changes we are going to talk about. So we are still working on, and we just started discussing a new and substantial change, and maybe you can leave us some feedback on it. We had it added on the proposed guidelines 5.3 on the draft, and what we are basically discussing right now is to move the evaluation timeline to 14 days and not 21 days like it is
On
now.
a side note here, when we originally proposed the 6-week cycle, the idea was always to have this 14-day cycle. Then due to lack of proper tools and the workload involved, we decided to first start off with a 3-week cycle. And now we're moving to the 2-week cycle, or we plan to move to the 2-week cycle like originally planned, and then decouple the tech evaluation from the full evaluation, so that you always know the tech evaluation happens essentially on the same day every second week. It will be the day of the roundtable. So the OIG will do the evaluations during the day. Then on the roundtable, we can discuss the results. And then after the roundtable, everything's pushed to chain in the evening.
Right. What we just shortly discussed today was how long a rolling period for those evaluations should be, 2 or 4 weeks. Like, we are looking at not exactly it is 4 weeks, 14 or 28 days. What's your opinion on this, everyone? How long should we be looking back in time when reviewing APIs?
Yeah, I think that works. I only have one suggestion. Maybe we should, it should be properly stated what and how evaluation is done, because I kind of, from the last evaluation, I misinterpret the proper timelines for for example, Oracle problem which we had for a couple of days, and I thought that it falls into another period of evaluation, and I think this requires some clarification how this is accounted in one or second period, or whichever is being done, because while we have these overlapping kind of evaluation periods for product is 3 weeks, if I remember correctly, and for infrastructure,
products don't have
6 weeks.
an overlap. So products is always 6 weeks without an overlap. And then we have
overlap in tech and product. It's kind of might be confusing sometimes.
Yeah, that's why we want to split these completely. So we have clear guidelines and clear rules, what is evaluated when, on which time frame. So there is no confusion anymore. The question we right now have is just, what rolling period do we use? Joseph is a fan of using a 30-day rolling period. So like you would have in regular stuff, you have this 30-day SLA, and then you just go with it. So then looking at it again today, I figured having a 30-day rolling period with evaluations every 2 weeks means every 2 weeks, the 2 days prior to the evaluation, if you fuck something up there and we have this 3 weeks rolling period, it means you're poisoning your evaluation for 3 full cycles. So that's why that might not be the best option, and why we should probably do 28 days instead of the full 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that bad timing thing has happened in the past also with our 3 and 6 week evaluation cycle, and we want to get rid of it. So since we are doing the evaluations now on that one day of the week, of every second week, if we are looking at the past 14 days, if you have an incident, you won't be punished 2 times for this incident. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yes.
Looking at 28 days,
I kind of agree with this. Well, regardless how hard you try to keep the SLA at 99.9%, it's kind of sometimes it's impossible because a lot of things happen, and yeah, this would be better, at least in my opinion. Maybe.
That's also a good point we started discussing since we had the incident this week. So there was an incident with Hyperion, for example. You may or you may not have fixed it inside 1 day or 2. How should we go about it? So we should probably introduce a grace period for incidents like those, where you have, for example, on if we were evaluating every 14 days, we would divide 100 by 14, which is like 7.14%. So 7% would be added to your uptime if we gave you 1 day of grace period to fix the Hyperion. So if you were down for 1 day, you would be at 93%. You would miss the full points for your Hyperion, for example. But then we would add another 7% to your score so that it works like a grace period for you to fix the incident. If you don't manage to fix the incident within this 1 day or whatever the grace period is, you would still have a reduced uptime plus grace period time. You would not make the cut for the full points. Can you follow this?
Yes.
So what about this grace period?
Yeah, it sounds good. I would only add that if there's an incident, it should be properly communicated to everyone involved. And if there's a fix for this incident, everyone should be taking part of fixing this.
Well,
if there's no response from a guild or a provider, then it's possible and it's fair to actually penalize.
There's 2 sides to that. I mean, I agree. If it's a known incident, relaying the information the best possible, but it wasn't a known incident until all of our alarms started going off because we monitor.
Exactly.
Hey, your Hyperion indexing is behind. Something's broken. We didn't know what it was, right? And then we figured out, oh, it's just broke. So I mean, that it's more about, and that's why some people probably still haven't fixed it, because they're not monitoring. And not to say they're not monitoring it, but they're not, making it. May be online, it just may not be, indexing anything new. So properly monitoring and being able to respond, is definitely,
yes, properly monitoring is kind of is required. We shouldn't discuss this because it's in our own interest to monitor our stuff.
Well, that's what led to the fix. I mean, that's what. So yeah, we can properly relay it once it got put out there.
If there's a fix from the point when this was kind of communicated in our internal channel or public channel, from this point, you can start counting time, for example.
So what we need to look at is who is responding and what is the response time after a fix is made available. And then we need to give a grace period. And the grace period is essentially the time where it's unfixable, where it's a chain-wide incident. And as soon as the hotfix is available, it becomes an individual incident. So we have this grace period for the chain-wide incident that is applied to everybody. And then we have this sort of individual grace period because it obviously takes some time to update and apply the fixes. So this needs to be extended slightly. But then it becomes individual and then people have to respond. And as we see right now, we have a lot of guilds, or quite a few, that did not respond, or did not apply the hotfix, didn't monitor it, didn't follow the conversations.
That was the second thing. And you said the slight, second side of it. I was somewhat floored. Because, it broke, I don't know, dinner our time or whatever. The fix actually came out after I had already, East Coast had gone to bed. So, it was 6, 7 a.m. before I got a chance to get it. So I applied it immediately. But it took hours to grind through and catch up because it was so much data that it got behind. When you get behind 12 hours and then scramble to try to resync. Now, I made the mistake. I left streaming on, which was just crushing the machine. So it took a lot longer than it should. But ultimately, the people that were attached to my stream needed to know the information. So I left it enabled and just let it grind on through. But it was interesting to me that even on my i9s with local hosts, and I had 2 of them that were grinding at the same time on separate sets of servers, that it took almost all day after a working day after I got the fix because I was 8 or 12 hours behind. Yes.
I do agree with this, but in this case, you are communicating with everyone. So this is actually a crucial point when you kind of interact with everyone and will make everyone know that you are not slacking off when everything is down,
I agree. It's hard to quantify that into a requirement, though, right? You don't get penalized as long as you say I'm here in Telegram. I'm cool.
I think the most likely scenario is that whenever we have chain-wide incidences, we will look into how long it takes to actually apply the fix. So we can take essentially measures of the people and see on chain how long it took people to fix. And when we can see like 50% of the people are back up online and the other 50% is not, then we can start to look into individual downtimes and see what is the reason for these guilds to not be back up. Did they not?
Here's the kicker. They're going, it's cumulative now, because if they're 3 days behind, it's going to take them 2 days to catch up. So.
That's why it's important to monitor these channels and why we have participation as essentially as a requirement, and why we want guilds to engage.
But back to the original point, I think it actually went down pretty well. It wasn't actually in our channel. I think it went down in the Hyperion channel, but then quickly started spilling around to the others. But I mean, the ones that are paying attention and monitoring, which was a substantial amount of them. I mean, it was an impressive response, but that went down relatively well for what it was, because it was network wide and it just blew everything up for everybody.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just wanted to point that out, that I was floored even with my setup that it took a full day to recover even after a good response and release was fixed. So obviously 48 hours.
Michael, with great power comes great responsibility.
I still had to wait just like all the rest of you guys. I guess that's my point, is that it doesn't matter. It's just a lot of waiting once you do get the fix.
One note here for Yanis, the 100 by 14 days.
Yeah.
Right now we're not on the 14-day schedule yet, so we will apply this depending on how we apply the next. So it's probably actually 30 days. So it will round up to about 5% uptime. Probably we are deducting or granting. So that's the other thing. The 14-day cycle will start with the 5.3 guidelines, and the 5.3 guidelines start with the 5.3 cutoff. So we're not having a technical evaluation today. We're not having that next to them in 2 weeks on Tuesday, but we're having them based on the originally announced time, or actually the corrected time, because we had a mix-up with the dates. So the next technical snapshot is the 5th of October. The guidelines. No, this is the 5.2 snap technical evaluation on the 5th of October. So 5.3 starts on the 15th of October with the full evaluation, or rather the end of 15th of October, so 16th of October.
Right.
And then we just need to agree on a rolling cycle. The question is if we want to have this overlap for major incidents, or if we don't. The other thing to factor in is if we move to only 14 days with a no overlap, then this also means we need to adjust all uptime percentages, because less time means every downtime counts double. So you could only lose 1 round and not 2. You could only lose 1 hour of Hyperion and so on. So if we reduce the evaluation time frame, the rolling window, down to 14 days, this also means we need to adjust all percentages for uptime.
Yeah, so a whole day of downtime would amount to around 93% of uptime. Yeah, so if you happen to sleep 2 hours longer and be busy with some family stuff, this could hurt your rating. Probably worth considering, yeah.
That's why we need to adjust the percentages we evaluate against if we go with a 14-day rolling window for the tech evaluations. That's just something to keep in mind if we go with 14 days. It means we need to adjust all the technical requirements.
Yeah.
May I think also, only my opinion, I think it's better, as you say, because it requires everyone to be more attentive to.
Yeah. I think we should have the 28 days and then we have the overlap. I think it makes more sense because this means you need to actually pay attention.
Yes, that's correct.
And this also means we can leave the percentages as is and everything remains at the state that people are used to.
But our general idea, is to provide better user experience for everyone who uses WAX. So it's better for blockchain.
Exactly.
So RPC API, it's like very important for a vital chain to interact for the user. The Hyperion, on the other side, would it really require you to have it fixed within 24 hours?
It's not just Hyperion, it's also history and V1 chain.
Yeah.
Well, some of the V1 chain. I mean, most of the V1 chain goes through. I mean, we don't even send V1 chain through Hyperion at all.
Yeah, but some only do it through Hyperion by these days.
Correct.
And Hyperion just forwards it to the V1 plugin. But still.
So 2 sides. I mean, there's number one, it's got streaming, and I mean, we only have, I don't know, half a dozen people. So it is more than just historical. We always think of Hyperion in history. So having to start adapt to, it's actually the real-time feed for some people. I don't know who exactly they are, but there's definitely 6 steady streamers off of our setup, as well as we mention API and Hyperion. More and more people are starting to adapt the P2P streaming method, which I think apparently is more efficient, definitely, than running Hyperion. So basically what they're doing is they're latching on to the peer-to-peer data and sniffing the changes out of it and then responding to it accordingly. So we've noticed a huge uptick in our peer-to-peer traffic, but it's also a lot easier and better, I think, for people to be able to do what they're trying to do and just getting by with Hyperion by doing it with this new peer-to-peer method. So I would say that providing a solid, good, heavy peer-to-peer service is becoming potentially almost as important as Hyperion in most aspects, because I think a lot of people are starting to use it. And I think it's actually, from what I hear, I don't know personally, but it may be a little bit better experience, definitely, than having to run Hyperion. But somebody else may know more about that. But it was an interesting. Oh, there you go, Knowles guy. Yeah, he'd probably know way the hell more about it than I do. But he may have been the one that wrote it. Who knows? But point is that I do think we talk about peer-to-peer being important, and even having full peer-to-peer logs, being able to sync the chain. But it's becoming more of an application data stream, more so than just a node replication stream. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what happens is you just listen for the newest blocks and
right.
You just decode with your ABI what you need, and that's it.
Yeah. Does it contain information that history ship provides? I think it's kind of different. No?
I think, number one, you can request old blocks. So I assume people can do it for whatever block they want. I mean, just like peer to peer, you can send a request for 2 blocks or whatever, and then do whatever you want with it. I think a lot of people are doing it for real-time streaming, as well as hot rod front run streaming, because they're catching it at the raw level. But
there's a problem with that, because this actually relays the load from the server to the client. So actually, if you do this as a client, it will require you to have some proper box to do this.
Yeah, the problem with that is. Sorry. No, I was just saying that the problem is that we have limited peer connections in our entire network. So if too many people do this, we will just run into an issue where you don't have enough open peers for people that want to actually run servers and replicate the blockchain.
I don't think we should encourage this.
I agree with you on the first part, not on the second part, because I mean, if the technology is better, I mean, I agree you shouldn't do it like the web app client side. But I think what people are doing is, instead of running Chronicle or running any of these, Hyperion or any of that, or Post PG Fill or whatever it was, that's a method that they're doing. And I'll be honest with you, I mean, if they're going to sync off of my node and run their own node and do it, I'm not as opposed against it. What I have been noticing, I had noticed there was some weirdness going on with our peer-to-peer over the last couple of months. I'd even mentioned it a couple of times. I would see connections stacking up. I would see them really fluctuate heavily. Now I just stay pegged out at like 120, 130 peer-to-peer connections, ripping 200-300 megabit a second out of here. But it's becoming, I think, much more important to provide peer-to-peer. And I do think I won't discourage people from using it until somebody really shows me how bad it is, because I don't think they have many other alternatives. But it is definitely, your nodes are going to start maxing out on connections if you don't have the block logs, or you're running these peer-to-peers in trimmed logs, things like that. That might actually become more prevalent in the functionality of the chain and apps and everything. But I do think it may be an advancement, because these layer 2 solutions are next level pain, in my opinion, for a dev that just wants the data, right? They just want to front run Alcor transactions. They don't want to run Hyperion.
Makes sense. Also, like, a vital public peering, isn't that a core functionality of a decentralized network? So you can just hook into it and listen for whatever is happening in this network.
I would say
consume it the way you like it.
It's kind of double-edged sword, because if you do this, you have to, for example, if you were doing serverless programming and you didn't have any servers and everything, if you do peer-to-peer, you have to implement either lambdas or something, and your infrastructure cost increases drastically if you are a developer in VAX. If you're using Hyperion or APIs publicly or privately, it kind of differs as well, because it's a lot cheaper, because you just can create a page or whatever lightweight you have, and just use Hyperion for history, etc., etc. It just has to be properly working Hyperion. That's all. So it's kind of hard to say which is better, but everything is valid.
I try not to make this, because I'm not a programmer, so I'm way out of my league anyway, but I look at myself as a service provider. So I try to provide whatever the developer, definitely what I'm picking up that they're starting to do. That's why I bring it to light, is I see Null in there shilling it all the time, and everybody's like, holy shit, yeah, I'm all about that. What's up? And all of a sudden my peer count keeps going up. So
the good thing that peer-to-peer servers are easy to scale. So
I don't disagree. I mean, but like I say, I wanted to point out that is, I think, becoming a replacement for a lot of these layer 2 services, and something that is easier to provide than layer 2, hell of a lot easier than Hyperion, but is also maybe something important to, to focus on, because it's much more than just syncing the network now. It's also feeding data out.
There's a great comment from, I'm sorry, I don't know how, what is your name? Include Null.
Null, right? That's how I call him, Null.
Most people are not using P2P for history. It's for the transaction before they are committed.
I think
correct. I think it's more of a streaming type of thing, probably not historical, but like I say, I think it would work historical as well, but it's more replacing that layer 2 streaming and being able to just get the data. But again, that's why I say Null knows way more about it than I do. I've just seen a lot of people using these libraries and going, oh, that's what's up, I can do that. And yeah, they're probably just arming transactions. But guess what? That's what my 128 million API calls were probably 127 million get table rows and push transactions to Algor.
True.
Okay, interesting topic. So edit it for now. I think we discussed it on the last roundtable also, that if we were to score or rate peer-to-peer infrastructure, we would require a full history on that node. So you can grab any block up down to block 1.
I think that just stating, yes, you need to have a full block log, and it needs to be able to handle as many connections as it can, right? Because I mean, they do start capping out after about 100 or 2. That machine starts getting mad at you, so you need to start load balancing. But like I say, it just keeps getting more and more, it seems. But yeah, I think it's a lot easier to have a full block log. I mean, it's 3.5 terabytes big. You can get one and keep it in sync versus 30 terabytes of Hyperion data.
Also, I think we have never discussed this before, but what's your stance on we should be rating chain API uptime individually, decoupled from history solutions, because that's where we achieve quality of life for the users. Chain API needs to be up. So whatever node you choose from your list, it should be just basically up 100% of the time, just to get table rows, push transactions, at a later stage, get transaction status when we make the upgrade to WAX 404. What's your opinion on this?
Do you want my opinion, or you want somebody else?
100% is impossible. It's kind of a fantasy situation. So it's always 99.9.
Oh, I don't know if it's fantasy situations. I mean, I'm fine with saying you really want to shoot for 5 nines. I mean, I've built a system that can do it. I mean, not to say my answer is I definitely think V1, what you call V1 chain, the standard API. Now, I understand most people route them through Hyperion, but they are two completely separate pieces and should always be decoupled in and tested and rated separately.
So let's call it RPC API.
There's a small problem for that. To have a proper 100% evaluation, you have to have 100% working monitoring system.
Well, and that's where I was going to go with it, was along what's valid and up. And we've had this conversation before. Most of us have figured out, and that we had this, is it fair to whitelist the monitors to make sure that they're monitoring the infrastructure? Or do you want to get them mixed up with those 128 million API calls? Because guess what? Every now and then you get throttled because there's just so much trash coming in the front door.
I mean that regardless how good you are, you cannot.
The better you are, 100%. The more they smash you. That's what I mean. The better you provide that free service for them, the less they have to work hard, right? So that's exactly the point I make. And we've been down this road before, but it's a very tough when you start saying, is it available 100% of the time? Because it's up. I promise you, it was fielding 500 requests a second. You just happened to be 501, and you got put in the queue for longer than the 2-second timeout that the curl test does, you know?
The problem is
it's up, but it's not 100% user availability. So, but
the problem we have with that is that we cannot tell if the issue is that the server is not able to serve enough requests, or if it's actually getting too many requests. And this is something we need to work out. So the part about the uptime is one way we want. So there's essentially two directions we are looking at. One direction is to get rid of public infrastructure as we have it right now. Go down a road like we have in Fura. So every user has a free tier, and all BPs essentially feed into the same public endpoints. We have one global load balancer, essentially. It's not one load balancer, but we have one infrastructure where everybody feeds in so that we can see and control how the load is distributed, and then we know whose endpoint are serving how much. This is
that's doable. We've seen that on other networks. I mean, I would say the pros probably do outweigh the cons. I will just mention some of the cons are what we've seen is when you've got so many public providers with so many different setups and so many just even different knobs and hardware they can run, is that it really caused some great confusion because every other request, I mean, even like if you hit my node sometimes, if one of them's out of whack, every other request may be a little different than the other one because you're just bouncing between servers. Yeah. And it became a rabbit hole to chase down. Your error is related to the API. Well, you just happen to hit this provider, and then they notify the provider and say, hey, by the way, you need to update a version or something like that. But it really, because Infura doesn't have that, right? You just get Infura. Exactly. You get Ethereum. You just do. You know?
That's one of the points. If we do this also means we need to streamline how the service is provided, what server endpoints are used, essentially everything in that case needs to be streamlined so everybody is on the same level. So we have a heterogeneous ecosystem or environment. So that's one direction. The other is to decentralize the validation. So probably in the end, the best idea is a solution of both worlds. For some things, we need to decentralize the validation by making every guild essentially a validator. Like right now, we have a couple validation tools, but I still want all the guilds or a great deal of the guilds to essentially run validations and feed an oracle that then on-chain calculates everything, like we do right now with Delphi Oracle, the benchmarks for execution etc.
And for decentralized solution, because the bigger you become, the harder you crash, I think.
And I think with the public infrastructure right now we have, this will also not work on the grand scale. If WAX grows, the public infrastructure will simply exhaust. And that's also why something like this semi-centralized service, where people have a free tier and then can opt into more, is also a good idea, because it also means we can create funding overhead that can then be used to improve the ecosystem in terms of providing infrastructure.
This can work, I think.
I'd agree. The lack of a centralized, I mean, what we call Infura is crushing from a dev aspect. I do think, Wharf may help it, where you can have multiple.
Definitely. There's also the Hyperion plugin in development by Rio that is also doing essentially decentralized load balancing. They're balancing through this plugin that also decides based on the incoming requests what stuff is serviced by whom and can be serviced by whom. But this is also not purpose-built for WAX. And WAX did not really want to contribute and get involved with that because the cost was too high. So we also have to see how that evolves.
Yeah, but I think we are cracking into a whole other topic, because we were supposed to talk about V1 and Chain API, which is like the basic functionality of the software, of the Antelope software. When you want to interact with the software, you want to host a node. You expect the user to connect to your node. In which way? He connects a wallet. He receives his keys. He receives info about the chain. He receives maybe a block, the current block, to know which block to use for your transaction. He pushes transactions. So that's what the functionality of a chain API is. Nothing with history or stuff like that. And that shouldn't be under like an Infura type API, but under that sense, it's like Wax.io as a company is providing this API through their cloud wallet at the moment. This is like the centralized, or what we call a centralized API endpoint for the end user to interact with. Whoever wants to join the network to validate should be obliged to have a working chain API all of the time. So you can get the current block, you can receive your keys for that account, you can do whatever we are basically evaluating right now. So where is it? Or what is listed now under wallet node. You want to get the accounts by the authorizer, you want to be able to, for example, push transactions, which is very important. So any node that is currently in our 36 guild roster should have a 99% uptime on push transaction, for example, and on get keys by get accounts by authorizers, for example. So that is like the very basic piece of this software that should always be up by anyone who wants to be validating. Even if you host your own node and you are not validating in the network, you will need this piece on your node to be able to read tables, to push transactions. So that's a very basic piece. The other thing, I don't know if we should be running Hyperion and like a decentralized one API for everyone to load balance what Chain API is doing, because this will just round trip these basic operations through all of the world. If in fact you just need your favorite validator and their node to be able to do those transactions, not speaking of history.
I'll speak on this, and I've talked to Igor and all of them over there about this before, is that until Hyperion is much better, and it is way more than it used to be, about showing the differences between the different providers, that is going to be a recipe for disaster unless it's heavily regulated, controlled, and monitored. Because like right now, yes, we got a lot of Hyperions that are up and online, and they may even have full history, but I'm pretty positive they don't have Alien World or Farmers World transactions in there. That's cool, but if you're using an API and one provider has it, we have Alien Worlds transactions. They don't. So depending on who you get, you could get a totally different, answer, as well as you saw, I mean, unless it breaks, Hyperion's very best effort, and if not, I'm moving on. Whereas like Atomic it's very rigid and it won't move forward until it's absolutely sure, which means everybody's got the exact same copy of the data. Hyperion doesn't work like that. I mean, you could have an issue deserializing. You could have your thresholds set a little differently, or even have boinked out and cleared out a queue and just be missing deltas for 200 blocks or something, right? Is that, and I love it. I mean, obviously, I'm a huge Hyperion fan, been my life for years and years. But when we start talking about this, and we've seen it on other networks that have done this global balancing, is that they don't use all of the public infrastructure that's out there because 80% of it isn't complete or reliable enough.
Yeah,
they really only pick 2 or 3.
Yeah, but that's the point. That's why we have the OIG in the middle that verifies that these are reliable, and if they aren't, they're not getting the points, and they would be kicked out of the system.
I'll ask Null because I know I've seen him in the channels. I'm pretty sure that even though y'all are doing a great job with everything that we've got, he would venture to say that I know there are developers that scream about the dramatic differences in good and reliable Hyperion infrastructure, much less somebody who may not know what they're doing. Just because it didn't deserialize, it ran past it, redis crashed, whatever. And you never know until somebody goes to say and says, you have 4 transactions in this block and this guy has 6. Well, that one had 982 authorizers, and I didn't deserialize it properly.
Yeah, we also have this. We have seen this on Block Explorers, where every refresh was using via some sort of round robin a different endpoint, and every time you load your account transaction, you would get a different outcome.
And so, that's that layer 2 problem. Whereas V1 is layer 1, right? It's much easier to provide that consistent experience. Plus those few add-ons, but man, V2 we got a long way to go. Before,
but I also think it's V1 is way more important than V2 at the current stage.
V1 chain, I guess.
Yeah, V1 chain.
V1 history.
I mean
let's
V1
stop calling
chain.
it RPC because I think there's a lot of confusion out there between V1 and V2. What we essentially mean is RPC, like remote procedure call, like exactly. Describing the method or the concept of communicating and transacting.
I call it the wax chain API when I'm talking to most people. Just how you interact with the chain. But like I say, I think it's also important and should be rolled in about how people are doing it via P2P. Which great news. It's that same layer 1. Just provide a full block log and have the right settings and features, and that's that core network infrastructure. And much easier to validate and load balance and even run 18 of them, I mean, it's a heck of a lot easier to run a wax node than it is to run a state history or a Hyperion or any of that.
I just want to add that we shouldn't take into account the extremes, either peer-to-peer only or Hyperion only. I think we should strive to provide the variety of tools for everyone. And I would say, from current perspective, Hyperion is mature. Well, it can be better, but it depends on provider. But if we implement, as Kafir suggested, I would say distributed validation for everyone, it will improve the Hyperion experience for blockchain users drastically, because the evaluation of Hyperion is important. And when the user has centralized endpoint which provides the evaluation scores for Hyperion endpoints, it's all that user needs, because we use Hyperion heavily as a company, and we use it in many perspectives of our development. And I would say it's a good tool. You just need to use it properly, And that's all.
Talking of this, we have like we want to make SSL mandatory, TLS 1.2 and TLS 1.3 minimum requirement. What's your opinion about HSTS on chain API and for wallet nodes? Is it currently part of your configuration when you're using Nginx?
I'll say this, and I mean it's somewhat related, I guess. We offer obviously HTTP, and I mean we support whatever 1213 is the current standard. Don't run any antiquated protocol that's going to obviously not provide the security intended. But I've been round and round on people with this before. We provide pure HTTP traffic. It is, as a service provider, I'm not making the decision how you're going to communicate with these nodes. If you want to save the SSL overhead because you have low bandwidth and get a 10% whatever, fine. Use HTTP where you find it fitting. I don't care if you do security things over it. But as a provider, we are of the mentality of not enforcing as much security other than keeping exploitable protocols, but rather providing the additional, maybe mainstream approach like a pure HTTP. If you're get table rows, you get a much faster performance, I think, off of pure HTTP traffic. But there's a lot of people that do 301s to the HTTPS, which that doesn't work.
Michael, it's kind of not exactly correct because HTTPS overhead is diminishingly small, and you cannot.
I've heard developers say otherwise.
The problem is, so what we're talking about is not providing HTTP, but providing HTTPS mandatory.
Yes.
It doesn't mean you can't provide HTTP, but we have had instances recently where guilds failed to update their SSL certificates and other things, and this would mean HTTPS was down, was not working. This means applications would not be able to use these endpoints anymore, validations would fail, and so on and so forth. And then we had the problem that HTTPS was not mandatory, so we couldn't justify not granting points on failed evaluations because it failed on a technicality that was not mandatory. So then again,
working SSL endpoint should be included, but I also say I think that HTTP should also be provided. But I may be in a
so
I think HTTP is actually a requirement. I think it says HTTP and HTTP.
I would say that for chain API, we should enforce HTTPS because people transfer keys over that. And it kind of
a developer's decision. I mean, I don't think that you should be required to use SSL to get table rows 1,000,000 times. You don't care; it's public data.
Yeah.
So it's only it would be only for the browser, which is respective. So that's where HSTS kicks in. It's only for your browser. So your browser gets a header which says you need to use SSL. Your HTTPS gets rejected in the browser. If you tend to use curl from your command line and ignore headers, it's okay.
Yeah, I was just confused because since we started, I think our guild started. It was in the middle of 2021, and I remember there was a requirement to have HTTP and HTTPS endpoints. Otherwise, you receive penalty if you don't have HTTPS endpoints.
Yeah.
So let's keep at that, I think.
Okay, let's postpone this part for now. But if you have a free minute and can dig into this, you surely touch this topic on the next roundtable again. Thanks, guys. It was a wonderful discussion today. Do you have anything to add? Do you want to share anything? Feedback? Was anything not so satisfying? Do you want to dig into any of those topics again?
Yeah, yesterday kind of sucked. That wasn't very satisfying.
That what?
It was very easy for us. I think we were working on excluding farmers' world anyway, and happened kind of in the middle of that.
Okay.
Pavel, can you please stop the recording when we are going to have
before you stop the recording, I have one last thing. Even though we're not many, because the people that complain aren't here, we are headed into the next round of OIG elections. So all the candidates that are attending and contributing highly to the governance development of WACS, and so rightfully complained during the last 2 elections. Now's your time to get prepared and engage with the community more.
Who's heads up for re-election? I know it's not you.
Yeah, it's not me, and it's not Giannis. So
said Spaniard.
So
okay, throw us your best. What would you expect of a very good candidate, and who would get your vote? What should he do? What should he bring with him to be a vital part of our network? I mean, besides joining any of the roundtables we hosted now, what else?
Carrying us a top spot definitely would get my vote, but I don't think that's what you're looking for.
No, I mean, during elections, there's a lot of interest, and people sometimes tend to throw a bad tantrum, but then they're just absent for the next few months until the next election happens.
I think we have a kind of a problem where most people that understand what guilds are doing, what to look out for, are either already in guilds or not that active, and we have a lot of people that only come for the elections and then just to throw a bit of a tantrum, complain about things. I would like to see those people more active in the guilds channels and learn about this stuff. So we probably don't have that many candidates again.
Yeah, this is also. Yeah, no, go for it.
I was going to say, I mean, and you guys have started doing a lot better about it. Is getting the information out. You know, I mean, so many times it's run right up on us, and it's been like, oh shit, the election starts in a week. Oh man, I don't even have the code ready. So, you know, getting a lot more proactive and getting the information out there, and you know, putting these videos out, and you know, inviting everybody, not just the BPs in, you know, whatever. I definitely think that more of that. Obviously, you know, nothing perfect yet, but you know, that's been a lot of their validity in the complaints is that, and that's why they only show up, you know, a week before the election, is because we don't really talk about it until about a week before the election.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So
yeah, we actually plan to start the election in a week.
But I mean, you get my point. I mean, and
a few months ago, we announced that there will be another election, and I guess everybody in the community already understands that there are 2 elections a year. So
we already announced that the elections would happen in October. So we will try to stick with the timeline of October, because in the past we always planned to have the election more towards the middle of the cycle, because this gives the candidates actual couple months time to free up their schedule, make all the required adjustments to their life whatsoever, and also give the parting IG the time to prepare for whatever he's doing after. So that's why we wanted to move this up and have it in the middle of the election, towards the end of the 3rd month, beginning of the 4th. So there's enough headroom that hasn't been there in the latest last elections.
And also we recently discussed, but there's no consensus on it yet, that we want to have this election and nomination period. So probably like in real world, nomination should be always open during all the period. because you show your interest, you get nominated. It's just a constant campaigning to show interest, to add value to the ecosystem. But then again, we should maybe shorten the voting period to just a shorter time, because it was really unpleasant for me also the last time.
It was also pointless. My last election was pretty pointless. Almost all the votes came in on the first 2 to 3 days, and then on the last 2 about. So by public demand, we extended both the nomination time frame and the election time frame. But in retrospective, it does not make sense to have this prolonged voting time frame. So that's definitely going down back to 1 week, because everything else just hinders our work, because it takes up too much time and is too much of a hassle for not really anything happening and coming around.
Correct. I think
candidates should be campaigning
yes
all time. If they are interested in the election, they should be campaigning 3 months before the election, 4 months right after the election happens. There will be another election in 6 months. You should be.
That's why the nomination has to be significantly before that. But we also need the attention of the election actually going on. So I actually think the 2 weeks were okay for campaigning amounts. People had enough time to find votes and stuff. I'm not sure that if we don't do that,
you don't have to wait.
I know, but the reality is they don't, and a lot of people are not paying attention.
The idea of the adjustment is that we have the nomination, and the nomination could be open essentially always. But we close the nominations 2 weeks before the voting. So you have a week, depending on how we do it, a week or 2, where you can get to know the definitive candidates that are definitely running. And we don't have this back and forth with I'm running, I'm not running. And so these absurd campaigns and just stirring the pot is something what we don't need. So that's why we have the nominations, then we have a fixed pool. People can really campaign, they do their last campaign. We can have the roundtables. Like in real world politics, you know who you can vote for, and you have a date when the voting starts, and then you have 1 week of voting, maybe even less. I think the Wax team back in the day recommended, we can just do 3 days of voting or 1 day of voting. I don't think that's feasible, but we can just have 1 week of voting, then have the candidates known in advance, 2 weeks in advance. So everybody can campaign for months if he wants, until the nomination phase ends. Then we have the grace period for high profile campaigning, whatever. And then we have the voting, that's 1 week, and that's it.
Also, maybe it's time for me to share an experience with you I made, because I was fairly new to the ecosystem, and all of you guys have been around since the inception of Wax, basically, or since the very beginning. Honestly, I think I'm very tech-savvy, but this ecosystem and its features, it's a fairly complex ecosystem, and you need to get some understanding of the tech, the market, the meaning for the user. It took me almost a year to get into things, to get to know the guilds, to talk to people, to dive into the products they have built in the past, the histories of guilds, what they have accomplished in the past, what they are accomplishing right now, where they are heading at, the teams involved, the developers involved. So it takes some time to get used to the ecosystem, to the work of an IG. That's where I expect. So that's where I would leave my vote to a guy that I know has been around for a year, has been active in channels, is building maybe an application, is hosting his nodes. That's what I would be looking for.
Yeah, that's why it's difficult if people just show up at the election time.
All the people you described are guilds.
Yeah, that's the issue for the most part. I was wondering, is the last candidate still around? Not the.
You mean Anders or Kevin?
Yeah, Anders.
It's the other Anders. He hasn't been really active in governance at all, and I haven't heard. I saw a tweet the other day, but I haven't been really following up. But what I did realize is that there has not been any activity on his labs proposal that was supposed to go into open beta like a while ago.
Oh, okay.
It just stopped on the second deliverable. So
yeah, I think one other issue is also that there are very few WAX developers in general, because let's face it, you cannot make a lot of money developing stuff on WAX at the moment. Therefore, we don't have many qualified people coming in and out of the channel to learn stuff. So yeah, it's in a bear market probably also quite difficult to get more people involved.
Well, we just got at least 2 people that are qualified that are not part of a guild anymore.
In here?
No, they're not in here. I mean, in the ecosystem.
Oh, true. Good point.
I think there's a lot of talent, but not so much interest at the moment. I wonder why that is. But whenever looking at the Antelope developer group, I see a lot of people answering questions.
Yeah,
Very
I think
text-away.
so. Over the past elections, I always started to try to reach out to potential candidates, but the usual answer I would get is it's not worth the effort. Like, campaigning and doing the work is not that interesting. Many say it's not paid enough, though I do think with the latest adjustment, the pay is fine. I get about what I would get in the open market. Maybe I would get a bit more if I wasn't in IG and would just work as a developer in the blockchain space as I used to. But still, the pay is good enough and definitely good.
It's but one of the best jobs I had in the past 5 years, honestly. I like it. I love it.
Yeah. But the impression still is among the people that are qualified that they can do like better. So
it's maybe not secure enough for the future or whatever. It's not going to be that long. Or
nothing is that secure, and we did extend it to 18 months because, as Janis said, one of the first things I realized was you can't do this properly in a 9-month window, and you can't have an election every 3 months. It's just not viable. So that's why we already extended it to 18 months. And yeah, so I think 18 months is not that secure, but it's secure enough. Yeah, as Null says, talent is occupied, but that's why we want to move to the wider time frames that the talent has time to free itself up if it wants to be in IG.
So technically in Germany, if you leave your company, they do it with 3 months spare. So
depending on how long you have been with them, it's 1 to 3 months.
Yeah.
So in a lot of cases, it's that's why I wanted to have the 3, because it means you win the election, you can hand in the resignation, and you're free in the 3 months when it's going up. And if you have a little bit of overlap, that's fine too, because you aren't fully capable of doing the job in the first month or so anyway. So you will also usually, what we did in the past, whenever we had a new IG, we would also already start to get him involved before he actually started off with his official tenure.
I guess.
It's beer market.
Crypto. I don't
know. The beer market, yeah.
Yeah, but the beer market, that would be. I would support that.
Crypto is that.
Yeah,
it's also pegged to USD, right?
Yeah. We're still so IGs earn standby plus 10%, also pegged to USD.
Yeah, you don't have to pay servers. It's much. I quit the guild.
Well, we also have to pay infrastructure costs. So Joseph is running servers. I have servers on and off that are used for testing and simulations. So we also have costs, but we don't have the same fixed costs as
we are
standbys.
Investing in our position. It's important for each of us brings different skill set. At least at this moment. This might change in the future, of course, with other members on the OIG. But yeah, at least I think we are all investing part of what we are getting, to stay in touch with the technology, with what happens. In my case, me being a blog producer in other chains, it helps me to stay in touch with the technology and everything.
I think the biggest aspect to keep in mind is that
responsibility.
Yeah, we have the responsibility. No, that was not what I meant. What I meant is the OIG are not right now suspect to performance scores. So we always get the full standby pay, unlike standbys. So this is the only part where being an IG is actually starting to become more interesting and more lucrative than potentially being a standby.
Do we get to rate the OIG, please?
Oh, you can always leave your feedback. Always.
But yeah, leave your feedback. That's your way to rate the IG and propose changes.
We ask you in the bottom of your report
some guidelines about here's what I expect you to do.
Good.
We always ask you in your reports. Last sentence in the
report. You should send what you expect from us.
I don't want you to read my opinions. I want you to have to fill out a monthly report that falls into these 3 categories with multipliers of 9, 6, and 2.385.
No, not monthly, just 6 weeks, yeah?
What about an anonymous Google form or something?
But seriously, I would like to also know, like in a form of a report, what you've been working on and stuff like that. It would be quite interesting, I guess.
We have this backlog thing on GitHub we need to maintain better and put more visibility on.
But it's also part of the agenda I just shared. So it says updates backlog at the beginning. So probably time to start it over again and have like a 5 minutes at the beginning of the roundtable to tell you guys what we have been working on.
One interesting part is analyze the Wax Labs proposals. And
it's technically not part of our job.
Read all of them.
So when do we get the island? That's the only question I have.
Even write a proper response when you sometimes don't think that the proper response, but
we can't evaluate the island proposal until we got flights to the island to evaluate the island. So yeah.
And reading the proposal.
So we have to start a proposal for the island proposal.
Justification of the work being done. It's more.
But it's more than that.
Work.
Because right now we're not only evaluating the proposals and giving our feedback to Wax, but we are also actively reaching out to almost all of the proposal attendees. So we're having a lot of talks with the proposals we send back as to be improved. And then we actually engage with the developers that are usually people from outside the Wax ecosystem and tell them what is already existing, what needs to be adjusted for this to work, or why it's not working, and so on. So this is actually taking up a lot of our time. Also, even though we're not making the final decision.
It would be nice if you could do that over the lab's website. Make suggestions, edit proposals, and adjust.
The new website is going live soon, so
in case you missed it.
A lot of improvements.
It's being relaunched right now.
Right now?
Yeah. So it's close to finish. Not sure. If we stop the recording in a few seconds, I can show some demo, probably.
Yeah, I think we can end the official part of the recording. I think what I wanted to say is that we have the elections upcoming and all the potential nominees should prepare. So I think every nominee in here has gotten that memo. And
I would actually like to see the demo, but I have to drop soon.
So you can stop the recording.
Should I stop recording? Or?
Yes.
Okay, it's